Hey guys, it's the Melblade 5, and in my second unpopular opinions video, I spent a great deal of time talking about why I actually like Fire Emblem Warriors. However, that isn't to say that the game is without its faults. I do really like the gameplay, and obviously that's the most important aspect of a game, so it's not like I'm painting this as a gargantuan problem, but my biggest issue with the game is not the roster, despite it being the thing everybody complains about. It's the plot. Because like I said back then, this game's plot makes Fates look like a masterpiece. Granted, I don't think Muso games have the most amazingly crafted stories in the world to begin with, so I wasn't expecting much, but when I was playing through the story mode for the first time, there were moments where I thought, is this seriously happening? And it felt almost like a kiddie version of Fire Emblem. When I was talking about the game before, it got me thinking about what they could have done with the plot to make it better, and I just started building on the idea to the point that I thought, I could probably make a video on this. I just wasn't 100% set on the idea until now. However, in a similar vein to my countdowns, there are some guidelines to this. The main one being that I will be maintaining some aspects of the original plot so that this really is an improvement, or an attempt at one, rather than a complete rewrite. So things like the basic plot points, the original characters, and their general backstories are not altered, as well as keeping the roster the same. I also mentioned in the past that some aspects of Hero's plot could be used to improve the story of Warriors, so expect me to make a number of comparisons to Heroes in this video. Also, there will obviously be spoilers in this video. Not that there's really much to spoil anyway. The crux of Warriors' plot rests on its final boss, Velazark, the Dragon of Chaos. It has the ability to create portals to other worlds, resulting in the other Fire Emblem characters crossing over and kickstarting the plot when Outrealm fiends attack Aetolis. This immediately leads to my first change in the story. For most of the game, Rowan and Liana are running around, meeting up with the other characters and collecting gleamstones without any real motivation. So here's the thing. King Oscar of Gristone is attempting to free Velazark from imprisonment, but this isn't stated early on, and is only made apparent in Chapter 17 when this game has 21 chapters total. The only hint we get of this beforehand is seeing Gristone forces as enemy units, which is still pretty vague. When playing the first half of the story mode, I was thinking, why are we actually doing all of this, other than just to close the portals? And how did the portals show up in the first place when Velazark hadn't been freed yet? For what I change, it relates to my first Heroes comparison. In Heroes, the basic plot is the war between the Asker Kingdom and the Emblem Empire, in which the latter is opening portals to other worlds and enforcing contracts onto the other Fire Emblem characters to force them to fight for them. Following a similar idea, instead of Gristone trying to free Velazark, is instead a power-hungry empire, which I shall dub the Dark Empire. In its quest for power, the Dark Empire has conquered numerous nations already, and by the beginning of the story is currently waging war against Aetolis. In order to defeat Aetolis and increase its power even further, the Empire seeks to free Velazark and use its abilities to add strong warriors from other worlds to their army before attempting to conquer their worlds. Because I'd imagine that an empire expanding across worlds would gain quite the reputation. This would create a clear antagonist from the get-go, and thus Rowan and Liana would have a much stronger motivation for what they do in the early chapters. To clear up the question of how did the portals appear before Velazark was revived, I decided to split the game's ritual into two parts. The Dark Empire performs the first half of the ritual, which allows them to tap into and slightly control Velazark's power to create the portals and enact their plan. With Velazark's power, the Dark Empire, backed up by a bunch of Outrealm fiends they spawned within Aetolis' capital, are able to wipe the floor of Aetolis' army and take over the kingdom. In the game's actual plot, at the end of the prologue, Yelena is strongly implied to have died given the circumstances, but much later they reveal she's still alive, completely out of the blue! For my version of the plot, Yelena is shown to have been kidnapped by the Dark Empire for use in the second half of the ritual, or just ritual in general for the actual story. And Rowan and Liana, alongside some remaining Aetolis soldiers, have to go into exile with help from Darius, which is reminiscent of Marth's backstory. This leads them to their encounters with the other Fire Emblem characters. For how it would change Rowan and Liana's meetings with the other Fire Emblem characters, as I alluded to earlier, I'm going to copy the idea of the contracts from Heroes by having the characters be forced into joining and fighting for the Dark Empire. Unlike in Heroes though, I'm going to make it more along the lines of mind control, in which Velazark's power corrupts them. Of course, upon being defeated, they are freed from the mind control and join the Aetolis forces. This would be a much more logical reason behind why the characters would be fighting each other compared to the actual story, where instead it's things like, oh, it was just a misunderstanding, or Frederick doesn't trust them. It would also prevent the Awakening and Fates arcs of the story from just being watered down rehashes of their own game's plots.
You bear the brand. Could it be?
Hello, Father.
Deja vu, I've just been in this place before.
As the Awakening and Fates characters join Aetolis, potentially alongside soldiers from their own kingdoms who have also been freed from mind control, the Dark Empire's army is significantly pushed back to the point that they meet Marth and the other Shadow Dragon characters, while Darius is not trapped in the fortress. I'll come back to this later. They travel to the World Tree to obtain the legendary swords in order to cleanse the continent of Velazar's power, and then the fortress comes into play, in which we reach the big plot twist of Darius betraying them and stealing the Shield of Flames for use in the ritual. This takes me to my biggest issue with this game's plot. I don't like how they handled Darius' betrayal and felt it was such a wasted opportunity for some good story elements. At first, I thought that Darius was evil and had been deceiving Rowan and Liana the whole time, but then it's revealed that he's actually been possessed by Velazark and acting against his will. I think it would have been so much better if Darius was evil, because it would have allowed for Rowan and Liana to receive some actual character development. They don't have any sort of character arc throughout this story. Their mum says they've grown so much, even though it's been like a week, but I don't see it. Rowan and Liana could have had a coming-of-age moment in which they have to accept the fact that their friend for years and all the kindness he showed them was fake, allowing them to transition from being naive and childish to becoming more mature. They refused to believe that Darius would willingly turn against them, and when I believed that Darius was evil, I thought they were going to have a moment where the truth hits them hard. But they didn't do that. They could have even had a scene where they feel like they can't trust anybody after coming to terms with Darius' actions, but the other characters placing their trust in them restores their faith and gives them the encouragement to move on as part of their growth into maturity. My initial reaction to this part can be summed up like this.
All they've been through, and they still trust their friend. Not a doubt in their mind. No power in this world or any other will shake their faith in him.
Truth be told, I've been there. I showed up, no earthly idea of who I was. Even then, Crom never gave up on me.
Trusting him so deeply, it's a powerful thing. If you believe in Darius, then I shall as well.
Always!
Right!
We got the power of friendship! Now let's all hold hands to stop Velazark. I mean, Fire Emblem has always had this cheesy strength of bond stuff, but this is going way too far. Let's just move on, and obviously Darius actually being evil and its impacts are added to my plots. So eventually the party manages to reach the Dark Empire's capital, where they are now attempting to perform the second half of the ritual by using Yelena as the royal blood sacrifice after Darius hands them the Shield of Flames. This chapter would involve storming the Imperial Castle, taking out the Empire's last line of defense, and battling against the Emperor, who Surtur is acting as a placeholder for. After the Emperor is defeated, he flees to the ritual chamber as he was simply buying enough time for the ritual to go ahead. Now, something I always questioned in the actual story when Oscar wants to revive Velazark is, what's not stopping Velazark from just killing him? His whole plan would go to waste. So I decided to add that whoever performs the ritual forms a blood pact with Velazark. This blood pact prevents Velazark from killing the summoner and is forced to listen to their commands in return for Velazark being given a barrier that protects it from all forms of harm. That way, the Emperor would be able to use it to conquer other kingdoms and worlds. But much like how Darius kills his father to be used as a sacrifice, after Yelena is rescued, Darius kills the Emperor and forms the blood pact with Velazark. As I'm making Darius evil in my version of the story, I'll need to give him some sort of motivation behind his actions. In the game, we never learn anything about Gristone as a kingdom. We just hear about it and know who the king and prince are. So I decided to take some creative liberties and say that Gristone used to be a strong kingdom centuries ago, but over time became very small and weak, vastly inferior compared to Aetolis and the Empire. This made Darius believe that Gristone deserved to return to its former glory by increasing its military and political influence. I could even make Gristone suffer from large-scale poverty and famine as a result of its loss of power to make Darius a bit of a sympathetic villain by also wanting to save the people of his kingdom. So when he learned about Velazark from hearing the legend, he immediately became infatuated and driven mad with the idea of reviving and controlling the dragon to make Gristone great again. So he secretly allied with the Dark Empire with the intention of betraying them so he could take over the ritual, whilst pretending to be allied with Aetolis to prevent raising suspicion. Now that Darius has formed a blood pact with Velazark, he orders the dragon to start destroying both Aetolis and the Dark Empire's military and castles so that Gristone can take over. But obviously Rowan, Lyanna, and the other heroes oppose him, so it takes us to the final battle where Velazark traps everybody in the interspace. This leads to a final confrontation with Darius in order to break the blood pact, where Rowan and Lyanna try to reason with him to make him stop doing this, and are still somewhat hesitant to fight him, but their words can't get through, so they must do it. In the end, Darius is killed, and this breaks the blood pact, causing the barrier around Velazark to disappear, but also for him to start going on a rampage as there's no one left to control him. Then in typical Fire Emblem fashion, we have the Dragon Final Boss, which ends in Velazark being slain, and thus closing all the portals, allowing for the other heroes to return to their worlds and time periods. With the war over, Aetolis dedicates itself to rebuilding the damage and providing aid for the people of Gristone living in poverty and hunger, thus ending my version of the story. I don't want to sound arrogant, but you see how much more interesting that was? The actual story has the main characters wandering around for little reason and getting into fights for stupid reasons, until Darius is separated and later betrays them, only to have a cop-out twist, and the protagonist not having any character development. I feel like my version at least somewhat improved those issues, although someone else could probably make a way better story than me. Still, this is all hypothetical, and the game's true story is what we're stuck with. At the very least, it's a spin-off game, and not a mainline one. I would dread to think of Free Houses and its adventures at Discount Hogwarts having this kind of plot.